On September 1, 1943, at Roble Airfield on New Britain, Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai hesitated over the intelligence briefing, his sole remaining eye, the other taken by U.S. gunners the previous year, tracing lines that drew a hearty chuckle from him inside the sweltering ops tent. The U.S. forces had rolled out a fresh fighter plane, bulky like a bomber and broad like a cargo hauler. They dubbed it the Hellcat. Spies indicated it tipped the scales at double the weight of our Zero. Just another botched effort from the Americans. Peering through the tent's openings, he spotted his squadron's A6M Zeros neatly arrayed on the perforated metal runway. Graceful, agile, lethal. Over the past 2 years, these machines had ruled the skies of the Pacific. British Hurricanes, US P-40s, Dutch Brewster Buffaloes, all had crumbled under the Zero's firepower. The Americans' newest creation, this cumbersome Hellcat, promised no exception. What Sakai couldn't foresee, what no Japanese naval pilots assembling for their daily rundown grasped, was that precisely 30 days hence, this supposed flop would launch the methodical dismantling of Japan's naval air forces. The F6F Hellcat would rack up a 19-to-1 kill rate, downing 5,223 adversary planes while forfeiting just 270 in dogfights. It would reshape battles from carriers, shatter the spine of Japanese aerial might, and demonstrate that the Zero's era of dread rested on flawed premises. The equations governing air dominance stood ready for overhaul by a plane that appeared awkward, handled ponderously, and defied every doctrine the Japanese had mastered. But in merely 6 months, the very airmen now mocking the intel dispatches would pen their last messages to family, aware that facing Hellcat spelled a near-guaranteed end. The peak of the rising sun. The Imperial Japanese Navy's assurance in September 1943 stemmed not from hubris but from cold calculation. From December 7, 1941, onward, the Imperial Japanese Naval Air Service had notched triumphs that strained credulity. At Pearl Harbor, 29 losses against 347 wrecked. In the Philippines, 7 downed for 103 eliminated. Above Darwin, 2 sacrificed versus 30. The British Far East Fleet's flying wing wiped out. The Dutch East Indies Air Force erased in mere days. At the heart of this supremacy soared the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, a craft that upended fighter engineering norms. When U.S. technicians examined seized models in 1942, they at first dismissed the stats as fabricated. A pursuit plane boasting a bomber's endurance, a biplane's agility, and armament to shred any target in its grasp. It bordered on the unreal. Warrant Officer Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, destined to claim 87 verified victories and become Japan's top ace, captured the Zero's essence in his salvaged journal. Piloting the Zero feels like donning wings. The plane anticipates your mind beyond mere stick and rudder. U.S. aircraft lumber like haulers, strong yet awkward. They craft fighters as if assembling autos, heavy, over-engineered, profligate. The Zero's astonishing capabilities arose from a bold engineering ethos. Extra super duralumin, a secret aluminum blend, yielded a frame 30% lighter than equivalent U.S. builds. No shielding guarded the cockpit, no resilient fuel cells burdened it. Radios were frequently stripped to shave even 30 pounds. Each gram yielded to speed and grace, the intel's brush-off. Early 1943 brought initial whispers of the F6F Hellcat to Japanese spies via impartial Swedish channels. The specs read like hype or outright deception. Loaded, the plane clocked 12,186 pounds. The Zero managed 5,800. Its wings covered 334 square feet, powered by a stubby radial mill dragging resistance. It packed 2,400 rounds of ammo, plating all over, shatterproof canopy, and puncture-proof tanks with 250 gallons of petrol. Captain Minoru Genda, the strategic mastermind behind Pearl Harbor, pored over the details at Combined Fleet HQ. His verdict, archived in Japanese military records, rang with scorn. The Americans remain clueless. This Hellcat embodies their persistent blunder, betting brute hardware against aviator prowess. A Zero will outmaneuver it effortlessly. The figures backed his view. With wing loading at 22 pounds per square foot, the Zero turned in a tight 612-foot circle. The Hellcat's 36.5 pounds per square foot hinted at a sluggish 900-plus foot loop. In dogfights reliant on turns, the core of Japanese tactics, the Hellcat would flounder. The initial sighting, September 30, 1943, Marcus Island, Petty Officer First Class. Yoshio Fukui, providing cover for a scouting run, caught sight of them. 6 deep blue forms ascending from the southeast. His immediate reaction, noted in his debrief. B-25 raiders veering oddly. Then they banked, revealing the telltale outline. Single propeller, hulking body, stubby wings mismatched to the bulk. First brush with an F6F type fighter, he later noted. Opening take. Americans have installed fighter-style guns on a torpedo bomber and dove in using conventional methods. Conventional methods involved leveraging the Zero's exceptional turning ability to slip behind the foe. Fukui banked sharply into a steep descent, anticipating the bulky U.S. fighter would press on in a straight line, letting him loop around to its rear. But then, an unexpected twist unfolded. The Hellcat refused to flee. It made no effort to match his turn. Instead, it shot straight up. Powered by the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, which generated 2,000 horsepower, 700 more than the Zero's Nakajima Sakai at 1,130 horsepower, the Hellcat surged skyward at 3,500 feet per minute. Fukui, straining to pursue, saw his speed bleed away as the Zero battled the pull of gravity. Reaching 15,000 feet, the Hellcat pulled off a stunt that defied its mass, a hammerhead stall that flipped it right onto Fukui's 6. The pilot from America unleashed his barrage at 400 meters, according to Fukui's account. 6 machine guns, exceeding our anticipated 4. The onslaught was overwhelming. My plane absorbed 17 strikes in just 3 seconds. Only by spiraling into a deliberate spin did I break free. Fukui made it through, limping back to Marcus Island in his perforated Zero. His wingman, Petty Officer Second Class Masao, vanished. So too did the reconnaissance aircraft under their protection. The Hellcat claimed its initial triumph, unraveling the weight riddle. On October 5, 1943, Task Force 14 assaulted Wake Island. Lieutenant Yoshio commanded 12 Zeros from the 252nd Air Group to challenge what seemed like yet another fleeting raid. For months, U.S. carriers had dispatched these quick strikes and dashes, often withdrawing before Japanese interceptors could close properly. This occasion proved otherwise. We ascended to 20,000 feet, noted Shega in his journal. Beneath, 12 F6F fighters arrayed in 3 sections. We possessed every edge: height, positioning, the element of surprise. Success seemed assured. The clash that ensued demolished Japanese combat principles. As the Zeros plunged toward the Hellcats, the enemy planes held steady, neither dispersing nor circling to engage. They preserved their lineup, picking up pace in a shallow drop that conserved their momentum. When the Zeros unleashed at extreme distance, banking on chance shots, the Hellcats weathered the assault. Their shielding featured 212 pounds of plating around the cockpit, 110 pounds guarding the oil setup, and self-sealing fuel cells that endured multiple punctures. With Zeros burning through their ammo in successive swoops, the Hellcats launched their riposte. Rather than twisting into a turning brawl, they turned their heft into an asset. Revving to maximum, they gained elevation where the Zero's power plant gasped for air. At 25,000 feet, the Hellcat still output 1,650 horsepower. The Zero managed only 900. They descended on us like falcons on finches, Shega penned. Their mass translated to velocity we couldn't rival. They'd swoop, unleash those 6 devastating cannons, then zoom upward before we could respond. 8 Zeros fell. Not a single Hellcat went down. The foreshadowing of the Marianas Turkey Shoot. November 11, 1943. Rabaul. Pilots from the 204th Air Group gathered as Lieutenant Commander Tao Tanamizu delivered the briefing on U.S. strategies. With 32 kills under his belt, Tanamizu ranked among the rare survivors of repeated Hellcat skirmishes. Discard all your prior knowledge of aerial warfare, he instructed. The enemy has rewritten the playbook. They avoid our style of battle. They operate like hangmen, not fighters. Tanamizu outlined the harsh lesson Japanese aviators were absorbing at great cost. The Hellcat wasn't built to outmaneuver the Zero. It was crafted to sidestep that necessity altogether. Drawing on a tactic known as energy fighting, Hellcat flyers conserved velocity and height, transforming stored energy into bursts of slashing strikes that denied Zero pilots any shot at exploiting their agility edge. They operate in tandem, Tanamizu went on, one positioned above, the other below. As you tangle with one, the partner is already plummeting toward you. Their radios, which we once mocked for the extra burden, enable flawless teamwork. We soar as lone samurai. They strike as a unified force. The widening tech divide, December 1943, Truck Lagoon. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, veteran leader of the Pearl Harbor raid, now acted as air operations chief for the combined fleet. Examining battle-scarred Zeros fresh from Hellcat duels exposed the escalating disparity in capabilities. The firepower imbalance was starkly quantifiable. The Hellcat's 6 Browning M2 50 caliber guns spat 750 rounds per minute apiece, totaling 4,500 rounds per minute. Each .50 50 caliber round tipped the scales at 46 grams and hurtled at 2,900 feet per second, packing 3,500 foot-pounds of impact. The Zero's 7.7mm machine guns hurled 11-gram projectiles at 2,300 feet per second, yielding just 750 foot-pounds. Even more alarming were accounts of U.S. radar-directed intercepts. Japanese flyers still depended on visual spotting, but Hellcat operators received vectors from carrier-based radar operators who detected incoming foes from 50 miles out. Lieutenant Sadamu Komachi recounted his initial radar-guided encounter. Enemy interception. Our formation was pushing upward through heavy overcast when the assault struck. There was zero alert, no sighting of the foe. Hellcats plummeted from higher levels, aligned precisely with our path, ideally placed for the attack. They had full awareness of our position, elevation, and trajectory. We operated like sightless combatants against opponents who navigated effortlessly in the gloom. The pilot disparity. January 1944. Japan's aviation personnel shortage had escalated to disastrous levels. The Imperial Navy's pre-war flight instruction regime stood as the globe's toughest. It spanned 3 years, with aviators deploying into battle boasting 700 hours aloft. Ground force flyers got at least 500 hours. They mastered the craft of sky warfare, honing skills in maneuvers, marksmanship, and the doctrinal mindset of dogfights. Yet by the start of 1944, naval aviators were heading to action with just 300 hours, Army ones with 200. Scarce fuel supplies forced much of the preparation onto gliders. Marksmanship drills capped at 50 bullets per trainee. Group maneuvers, navigation by instruments, communication protocols, all scrapped to hurry personnel to the battle lines. In contrast, U.S. aviators showed up with no fewer than 300 hours, among them 50 in their specific model. They unleashed countless training shots, drilled deck approaches to instinctive levels, and drilled power management strategies securely over Texas bases. Lieutenant Commander Yoshihiro Hashimoto, the instruction lead at Kasumigara Naval Air Station, noted in his concluding assessment, "We are sending children to fight professionals." The day before, Ensign Yamamoto reported to the combat zone. He had never fired his guns in flight. "We have no ammunition for practice." He had never flown at night. "We have no fuel for such training." He lasted 7 minutes in his first combat. The Formosa Awakening, October 12 to 16, 1944. The Formosa Clash. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukuomi, head of the 2nd Air Fleet, threw all resources into halting U.S. carrier assaults on Formosa. More than 700 planes, encompassing the final skilled crews from domestic instruction units. Tokyo proclaimed a stunning triumph. 26 carriers and battleships sent to the bottom, 300 enemy planes obliterated. But the true toll emerged only once aviators came back, and footage from onboard cameras got processed. It was devastating. Genuine U.S. casualties stood at 89 planes. Japanese toll, 329 aircraft plus nearly all seasoned pilots. Lieutenant Sadaki Akamatsu, among the scant survivors, recounted the massacre in his recollections. Hellcats lurked across every height band. During our ascent, they held the upper edge. In descent, they controlled the lower zones. They segmented the airspace into zones, each patrolled by a squadron. This wasn't warfare. It amounted to organized annihilation. The epic Marianas Turkey Shoot, June 19, 1944, the Philippine Sea. Japan's fleet unleashed its rebuilt carrier contingent for Operation Ago, the pivotal confrontation meant to shatter U.S. carrier dominance in the Pacific. 9 carriers, 450 planes, featuring their top surviving aviators, opposing them. Task Force 58, boasting 15 carriers and 956 aircraft, 450 being F6F Hellcats. Admiral Jibaro Ozawa dispatched his assaults in 4 surges, assured that Japanese flyer expertise and the Zero's reach would carry the day. The initial group of 69 planes took off at Ors 30. U.S. radar picked them up at 150 miles out. Hellcats directed for ambush with flawless setup. Height superiority, sunlight behind them, closing from the Japanese weak angles. Lieutenant Zenji Arbe, spearheading the escort fighters, spotted the Hellcats moments prior to clash. They layered from 20,000 to 30,000 feet, no fewer than 60 strong, positioned like an iron barrier. We flew at 18,000 feet. All edges favored them. The fight wrapped in 12 minutes. From the 69 Japanese planes, 42 fell. Commander David McSell, leader of Air Group 15, downed 7 planes that day alone. His partner, Lieutenant Roy Rushing, claimed 6. The Zeros tried to turn with us, McSell noted. We simply refused. We'd make a high-side run, shoot one down, zoom climb back to altitude. They'd try to follow, stall out, and another Hellcat would pick them off. By day's end, the Japanese had lost 346 carrier aircraft plus 50 land-based aircraft. American losses, 30 aircraft from all causes. American pilots in their ready rooms that evening coined the term turkey shoot. The enemy aircraft had been as helpless as game birds. The Lady Gulf feat, October 24, 1944, the Battle of Lady Gulf. Commander David McCampbell would establish his one-mission benchmark in this action. Guiding 7 Hellcats from Essex, he confronted a group of 60 Japanese planes bearing down on the U.S. Armada. In the 90-minute skirmish that followed, McKell accounted for 9 kills, 5 Zeros and 4 bombers, while his partner, Roy Rushing, took out 6 others. I ran out of ammunition after the 9th kill, McKell recorded. The Hellcat performed flawlessly throughout. Not a single hit on my aircraft despite being outnumbered 8-1. This encounter showcased the total shift in sky dominance. 7 Hellcats had scattered 60 Japanese aircraft, destroying 15 WIT without a single loss. McCampbell's feats of becoming an ace in a single day, 7 victories on June 19th and 9 on October 24th, brought him the Medal of Honor along with the Navy Cross. The mental breakdown. The consequences of the battles in the Philippine Sea and Lady Gulf led Japanese military experts to later describe a condition called Hellcat psychosis among the pilots who survived. In his post-battle assessment, Admiral Ozawa noted, "The foe's radar-directed fighter control accomplished what we deemed unattainable, the mechanization of aerial warfare. Every Hellcat functioned not as a lone warrior, but as part of an enormous apparatus. No matter their expertise, our aviators faced not merely aircraft, but an entire network. The scarcity of pilots grew so severe that by the start of 1945, instruction time dropped to 40-50 hours for naval flyers and 60-70 hours for Army ones. Kamikaze operators got just 40 to 50 hours altogether, roughly a week's preparation. The Okinawa catastrophe, April through June 1945, Operation Iceberg, Japan sent out WIT 900 kamikaze missions targeting the U.S. Armada near Okinawa. The Hellcat evolved beyond a mere interceptor into a shield against these frantic suicide runs. Lieutenant Eugene Valencia, commanding his squadron of Hellcats in a flying circus formation, downed 23 Japanese planes over the course of the operation. His strategic breakthroughs, employing groups of 4 planes in synchronized strikes, rendered the enemy's classic methods utterly fatal. "We came up with something we dubbed the mowing machine," Valencia described. 4 Hellcats flying abreast, spaced 100 yards apart, would charge through enemy groups at full throttle. Each flyer watched his assigned area. We'd execute a single sweep, gain elevation again, and go back for more. The figures from the Okinawa effort were grim. Hellcats conducted 38,038 combat flights, securing 351 kills while suffering 249 defeats, a ratio of 5-1. Even more crucially, they blocked about 80% of kamikaze planes from hitting their marks. The technological divide. By 1945, the disparity in tech had grown impossible to close. Enhancements to the F6F Hellcat variant amplified its lethality further. Features like water injection for up to 2,200 horsepower, zero-length rocket pods, enhanced protection, and the Mark 14 gyroscopic sight that handled lead calculations on its own. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, Japan's famed top scorer with 28 confirmed kills, though recent scholars peg it nearer 15, first clashed with Hellcats in June 1944. For all his prowess and battles under his belt, he barely escaped death in that initial fight. "I executed my finest aerobatics," he recounted in his memoir. "Loops, rolls, splits, every trick honed across more than 200 dogfights. The Hellcat tracked me effortlessly, almost indifferently. I lived only because the U.S. pilot slipped up. He neglected to jettison his external fuel tank prior to engaging. The toll on lives." When the war concluded, the F6F Hellcat had eliminated 5,123 adversary planes in dogfights, sacrificed 270 to hostile fighters, notched a 19.3.1 destruction rate, created 305 aces in the U.S. Navy, and claimed 75% of all naval air combat triumphs. Japan's losses proved devastating. From the 18,000 naval aviators at the war's outset, barely 100 battle-hardened ones lingered by August 1945. The kamikaze calculus. Japan's shift from a premier air arm to kamikaze tactics marked the stark acknowledgement of Hellcat dominance. Lacking the means for standard confrontation, the nation converted its airmen into human projectiles. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi, architect of the Kamikaze Initiative, defended it through cold logic. A Zero striking a carrier in normal fashion has virtually no chance of succeeding. The Hellcats would obliterate it. But if the Zero turns into a living explosive, the odds of impact rise to 30%. The aviator perishes regardless. At minimum, in kamikaze form, his sacrifice carries purpose. On October 25, 1944, Hiroyoshi Nishizawa guarded the inaugural formal kamikaze sortie under Lieutenant Yukio Seki and added his 86th and 87th triumphs, 2 F6F Hellcats in the bargain. The following day, October 26, 1944, Nishizawa perished as a rider on a transport felled by Hellcats from VF-14. Japan's premier ace, unarmed and vulnerable, succumbed to the same machine he had momentarily outmaneuvered. The closing account. August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito's announcement of capitulation. At Atsugi Airfield, Captain Minoru Genda, who once belittled the Hellcat as bulk without grace, heard the sovereign's declaration. Nearby were the shattered remains of Japan's Naval Air Service, adolescent trainees with merely 40 hours aloft, planes pieced from leftovers, tanks devoid of fuel. That very afternoon, past 2 p.m., Ensign Clarence Moore of VF-31, operating from USS Belleau Wood, dispatched a Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bomber, the final air kill of World War II. The Japanese flyer, seemingly oblivious to the armistice, neared the U.S. task force when Moore engaged. A pair of quick volleys from the Hellcat's .650 calibers concluded the Pacific Air Campaign. The post-war insight, September 1945. Tsugi Airfield marked a pivotal moment. Following Japan's surrender, the initial U.S. planes to touchdown consisted of 12 F6F Hellcats from the USS Yorktown. Japanese aviators, technicians, and support personnel assembled along the tarmac, eager for a first-hand glimpse of their formidable adversary. U.S. aviator Lieutenant Robert Vasu, a skilled pilot boasting 19 kills, showcased the Hellcat's prowess to the assembled Japanese flyers. His effortless maneuvers, loops, rolls, and steep ascents that would have shredded a Zero, rendered the onlookers utterly silent. "You must grasp this," Vasu explained via interpreter. "We're not even straining it here. During actual engagements with water injection engaged, it delivers 20% greater power. The airframe is built to handle 13 Gs. I've yet to damage one myself." Post-war engineering analysis. After the conflict, Japanese specialists examined seized Hellcats, uncovering the full scope of U.S. manufacturing prowess. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine featured 2,104 precisely crafted components, all fully swappable across any other R2800 unit. In contrast, the Nakajima Sakai demanded manual adjustments for each part. No pair of those engines matched perfectly. Jiro Horikoshi, the Zero's creator, delved deeply into the Hellcat studies post-war. His verdict proved crushing. We crafted a plane suited to 1941. They engineered a complete aerial ecosystem for 1945. As we honed the blade, they forged the machinery of industry. The manufacturing triumph. Grumman's Hellcat output itself emerged as a strategic asset. The Bethpage, New York facility ran non-stop 24/7. During maximum output, and fresh Hellcat emerged from the line every hour. The firm manufactured 12,275 Hellcats over 30 months, an accomplishment that baffled the Japanese. In 1944, Japan assembled 5,100 fighters across all varieties. The U.S. alone churned out 35,000 that same year. Their assembly process incorporated breakthroughs that struck Japanese analysts as unbelievable. Color-guided directives for intricate assemblies, continuous shifts, and unwavering quality amid the rush. The tactical shift. The Hellcat transcended mere victories. It transformed carrier operations. Before the war, naval strategy viewed carriers as fragile bases reliant on preemptive assaults for protection. The Hellcat upended that view. Now, carriers stood as impregnable strongholds, capable of withstanding and countering aerial assaults. Admiral Mark Mitcher, leading Task Force 58, recognized this evolution. Equipped with the Hellcat, he noted, we no longer have to seek them out. Allow them to approach. The F6F will annihilate them on our terms. Such assurance enabled bold, sustained advances. U.S. carriers could linger near hostile shores for extended periods, shielded by Hellcat formations that rendered them nearly impervious to bombers. The clash of mindsets. More than hardware, the Hellcat symbolized a worldview that dismantled Japanese martial principles. Samurai heritage prized personal mastery, inner resolve, and readiness to perish. The Hellcat, however, reflected methodical precision, resource dominance, and value on survival. This ideological divide prevented Japanese airmen from adjusting to Hellcat strategies, even when they comprehended the mechanics. The idea of avoiding unequal fights, core to Hellcat tactics, simply defied the mindset of pilots steeped in Bushido. History's verdict. In 1962, a U.S. Navy conference on Pacific aerial combat convened veterans from both sides for reflective dialogue. Captain David McCampbell, the top Navy scorer with 34 triumphs, declared bluntly, "The Hellcat secured the Pacific skies, end of story. It obliterated Japanese air power and ensured our success." Commander Saburo Sakai countered, "The Zero excelled as a dogfighter. The Hellcat surpassed as an integrated arsenal. We grasped the distinction only after the damage was done. We entered with blades against firearms and puzzled over our defeat." The final tally. The Hellcat's supremacy boils down to stark figures that reveal a deeper narrative. Overall kill ratio stood at 19:1, narrowing to 13.1 versus Zeros. Hellcats totaled 12,275, built in 30 months. Zeros from 1943 to 1945 numbered roughly 6,000. Over 5,000 American pilots qualified on Hellcats. By August 1945, Japan had fewer than 100 proficient combat pilots left. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, who directed the Japanese Navy at the Philippine Sea, offered the frankest evaluation. "We mocked the Hellcat initially, blind to how it embodied not merely a machine, but a whole society's war methodology. When the mockery faded, so had our skies." Closing reflection. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai endured until 2000. In his last discussion, queried on the Hellcat, he summed up its overwhelming impact. The Zero elevated Japan to naval prominence. The Hellcat forced Japan to confront its overblown self-image. We saw ourselves as warriors. The Hellcat revealed us as ordinary folk with obsolete arms confronting progress. Every Japanese pilot who made it through the war did so because of hell. The Hellcat aviator decided to spare their lives, a profound humiliation, surviving solely by the foe's mercy. The F6F Hellcat joined the fray, boasting double the weight of the Zero, equipped with protective plating absent from its rival. Driven by a motor beyond Japan's manufacturing prowess, outfitted with firepower surpassing what the enemy could replicate, steered by detection systems invisible to their senses, commanded by aviators whose preparation outstripped any Japanese counterpart, and manufactured in quantities that defied their imagination. Enemy airmen had scoffed at its bulk, failing to grasp that each additional ounce symbolized not frailty, but the robustness of an industrial republic willing to safeguard its fighters. Once the truth dawned, their derision morphed into desperate farewells to loved ones, their taunts into suicidal charges, their assurance into utter disintegration. The Hellcat didn't merely overcome the Zeros, it dismantled a whole doctrine of battle, demonstrating that in contemporary warfare, the power-forging superior machinery would inevitably overwhelm the one excelling only in elite fighters. Japanese aviators had mocked the F6F Hellcat. The Hellcat claimed the final triumph. It invariably would.